Hello, hello, my friends and colleagues around the world. Welcome for another Saturday of the live that we're actually streaming from YouTube, Facebook, and of course, all-time favorite, LinkedIn. This morning, you are up for the treat. We are covering something that I think everyone, either already in existing leadership role or not, should be paying attention. We're cracking leadership code, and we will dispel what that exactly means. You guys know I'm so passionate about it, and why does matter? Because we want to dispel myths, but we also want to answer the questions why so many are kept awake at night because what is going on in their working environment or an environment in their home or community, and opportunities where we can make magic happen. Without further ado, let me introduce you for our first guest. Here with us is Dr. Pauline Crawford. And you guys, if you didn't have a chance to discover who she is, you are about to be for a treat. Her extensive background, oh my goodness, where do you start? Dr. Pauline has so many accomplishments, but the best part is she spent over the last 30 years cracking leadership code and trying to understand gender dynamics and how we can actually minimize conflicts, how we can have a better harmonious communication, and so much more. She will tell you shortly a little bit more about herself. Welcome, Pauline. How are you?
I'm absolutely fabulous today, Isabella. I'm really looking forward to this amazing challenge because life is beautiful as well as challenging, and it's full of opportunities. So fantastic.
Fantastic. So great to hear that. We're seeing some comments already coming from a wide range of streams, including YouTube and LinkedIn. And I'm super uber excited to see already people being active and wanted to know more. And let's don't forget someone else who is absolutely pleasure and joy to have on our conversations here on our live, that I cannot wait again to introduce to Timothy or Tim Bowen, as someone who I had a privilege to also get to know and learn a great deal from. So welcome, Timothy. And for everyone that does not know who Tim is, you guys are again for a treat. He's someone who served the United States, our country, with tremendous pride, who created tremendous impact and footprint, not only as a U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer, but also peacekeeper who worked with NATO, who made us such a tremendous impact on immigration, also naturalization, and worked with INS and U.S. State Departments and FBI and so forth. But one of his legacies is obviously how he transformed the government during his tenure, and one of my closest to my heart efforts he did with NATO during peacekeeping in Balkans, where I actually was stuck during the war. So, Tim, how are you, first of all? Welcome.
Well, thank you, Isabella. I'm doing fine. It's great to have everybody on here today, and we hope that we can give you some enlightenment here.
That's fantastic. I'm sure we'll be able to. And we're seeing here some great comments saying that they're looking forward to this conversation. They wanted to know a little bit about a great topic. And topic of the day, topic of the year already is what keeps us alive. I mean, what keep us awake? And actually, yes, what keep us alive, but what keep us awake at night. We hear this a lot of times. The CEOs are usually the ones that are pondering heavy load of challenges they're dealing with. But in reality, everybody is. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, I was just thinking that what keeps us awake at night could be negative or positive. So that'll be interesting for the audience to think about that. If you're using your imagination and you're excited about what you're doing, you have a passion and a legacy to deliver to the world, then possibly you stay awake at night thinking of ideas. I know I do. I often can't get to sleep even when I'm tired because I've got so many ideas bubbling. But I dare say there are a lot of leaders who don't sleep at night because they're worrying, they're concerned, they're frustrated. Maybe they're angry at the downturn of business and their life. You know, that's the thing. It's positive and negative. And that's what we got to explore, is how do those things impact us as individuals? Because that's what we take into the world every day. And I saw an interesting quote this morning, which was, every choice we make today shapes the world we wake up in tomorrow.
Wow. I guess some things keep us alive at night. Some things that keep us awake. Tim, what are your what is your take on that?
Okay, this is about, I see this as about the way you control your life and the way you control your situation. And sometimes it takes a while to get a grasp of what you have. Because one of my favorite quotes is from former Marine Corps General James Matisse. And somebody asked him, "What keeps you awake at night?" And his response was, "Nothing. What I do keeps others awake at night." And when you look at it from a perspective of being in control and being self-assured, not on a false narcissistic basis, but on a basis of, I know what I'm doing, I have charge of this, you can minimize that. Because yes, sometimes it is something very positive. Thoughts are going through your head, ideas are hitting you left and right, and you want to capitalize on that. But at the same time, you have to control yourself and know when to focus on that and when to focus on your life and your personal life away from work and your business.
Absolutely. I think one of the key words that came up for me then was release. Release what you don't need when you go to sleep. And there are techniques to do that. But that's absolutely spot on.
And depends where we're at in trajectory in our own life, right? Where we live geographically at this part time in global shifts and changes. We see plethora of issue happening. We see wars, we see environmental disasters, but we also see different regimes. And we're not going to necessarily dive into politics and all of that. But because as a result, like what is happening, what keeps people awake at night in Ukraine and neighboring countries or other parts of Africa where a lot of conflicts going on might be completely different from our own daily realities. But then what do we do, as you mentioned, not only to release that, but mention to do the best that we can where we're at with the circumstances we're served with?
I think it's very much, to follow on from Tim, is that it's very much about your sort of own value proposition, your philosophy of life. You know, where do you see yourself in the cycle of influence and impact? And starting with yourself, because that's the only person that you can actually manage. The only person you can influence is yourself. So my basic prophecy is called value creation. If I know myself, then I can build relationships with other people and therefore build the world. And that's a cycle of intention and value. But I believe that a lot of people don't even value themselves, let alone other people, or else they put other people on a pedestal and don't value themselves. What do you think, Tim?
I look at it quite that way, Pauline. It's a case of knowing yourself and knowing your abilities, your talents. What got you here? Okay, you're the person in this leadership position now. Okay, you're not there as an accidental tourist. You came into this job because you had the talent and skills to do it. So now it's time to believe in those and maximize them. You know what you've got. You know your people. You know what your mission is. You put this together and you start saying, okay, what do I need to do for solutions? And that's what you do when you're at work, is put that together. When you're at home, it's time to leave it at work, at the office, at the building, whatever you need to do, leave it behind. If you're working remotely, okay, when you walk out of your office at home, close that door and leave it behind, and then focus on yourself, your family, the activities that you like to do. Put it away, and this will help it do it. Now, ideas are going to hit you, and that's great. Have a notepad handy, write it down, save it for later. But focus on your other things, and it will help you relax.
We have a little bit of pause here.
Your work.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, because I study it, is understanding the different perspectives of men and women. Because one of the things that I've studied over the last 30 years and all my life is that women have a different journey to men and have a different trajectory. And one of the things I felt when I started studying women in the workplace was that women brought life to work because they couldn't leave it at home. And by that, I mean their family commitment and their, dare I say, their hormonal commitment, that women just were not able to separate work and home as much. So I think that sometimes the practices to really self-value can be in the workplace as well. So I would offer that as a possibility of a different conversation at work. What do you think, Isabella?
That's fantastic. And I think we can explore further. And based on the comments that we have from our great audience and friends and colleagues, we have here Aberdeen showing up and saying hello. Great to see you. Thank you for your support. We have also Andreas share a little bit about his perspective, what he does, what keeps him awake, and then how it is also a very relevant topic. Thank you so much for showing up and sharing that. We really appreciate it. We also have a comment from Paul, because some people truly by nature don't sleep very well. They have a wide range of reasons, or some people are the most creative at that time, right? So we have obviously opportunities to examine that. But in general, when we think about what keeps us awake at night is really stressors, things that trigger us, things that affect us. And sometimes we're not aware of. That can be subconscious. And most of the time, actually, they are before we are aware of them and become conscious issue and concern, right? Because then loved ones see us as being restless, or a lot of times we also affect interpersonal relationship with people in our closest circle. But at the same time, because we live in time where there's so much ambiguity and so much unknown, right? So it's very difficult to really predict what's going to happen. And I love what both of you stressed, how important it is to control controllables, things that we can. But one thing I have to also just quickly add before we go to another topic around this is that even though, yes, we leave things at work, depending what we do. I remember talking in the past with first responders in crisis. If they could not have shared consideration or understanding by their loved ones, a lot of their relationship were not able to sustain. And I experienced that firsthand working in torture rehabilitation center and focusing so much of giving that I recognized that I had depleted my own resources, my own capacity that I needed so that I can be the best version of me. And I didn't even know how quickly can PTS creep up. We don't know how quickly some other issues can come up and resurface or retrigger, and how important it is really to pay attention and voice those things. And with that in mind, how do you, with all the pressures from industries and topics you've been engaged with over decades and very dangerous situations or challenging environments, kept yourself balanced harmoniously within yourself and everybody around you?
I think the dangerous situations are you, Tim. I haven't been as many dangerous situations as you. Although I'll share later, but you tell us first.
Okay. Yeah, I'll take that one. It's a case of just, first of all, knowing yourself and knowing your people. You have them trained. You know what the situation is. You also know what you signed on for. You know what as much as you can about what you face and the situation and the issues that will be involved in it. And then you prepare for it. You make sure that everybody is specifically on target as to what they need to know and how they need to do their job in the situation. And you keep your eyes open. You're always watching, you're always looking. And yes, when you're in situations where you're sleeping like that, sometimes you might sleep a little lighter, where the slightest odd sound that should not be there is going to wake you up. And this is something that comes as a kind of natural conditioning. But at the same time, you have to know when you're in a safe zone and when you can just let it go, because your body needs the rest and recharging. Just like you need the food for fuel, you need the sleep to recharge those batteries and get yourself sharp. Because one of the things I had to deal with in serving in Haiti was our people did have some off time, and their off time they like to unwind. Well, they like to play video games, and sometimes they didn't know when to stop. And I said, well, you have a point where you're going to have to, I need a fresh brain out on the streets the next day. So at this time, you cut it off, you go to sleep, and you get your rest, and why it's important. And recognizing that that is an important factor in what you're doing to maintain your health and well being and your ability to do your job is important. Because having a fresh brain out there is do that. Some people can function with just a few hours sleep, many others cannot. And even those that don't sleep a lot, it does wear over time. I would see this a lot when we were doing mostly military exercises. Some of the higher ranking commanders would not sleep. You start to see it in them after several days that they're slowing down, they're getting tired. Almost you kick them out the door and say, go get some rest. We got this. And that's where you have to rely on your other people to understand this. You don't carry that weight alone. Everybody is working on it together. So that gives you a little less worry.
Well,
And how about you, Pauline? Because you've been working with a lot of large corporations over
yeah.
your tenure, and you know corporate arena, not only from Europe, from UK, but also US and on global platforms. And I'm curious, before we dive into really important part of this, what was your way to balance that and self-regulate and also help others?
Well, I think that definitely my experience of working with clients inside organizations that were huge was actually understanding that for them it was like living in their own jungle. So, you would go into one department, it would be a certain atmosphere, but then you'll go into another corridor and it's different. You work with teams and they would love the work and then say, yeah, but the whole culture is so awful. It's like going back into, dare I say, a battle zone. And I think the challenge is with organizations as they scale up, you start getting into, like British Telecom and Barclays I worked with, where there's tens and tens of thousands. It's you can't get to know everybody. So you're limited in your control function. I'm sure it's the same in the military. So you actually have to understand your own criteria, exactly what Tim was saying. But what occurred to me also was, dare I say, bringing in the whole idea of motherhood, because although my years as a mom are a long time ago, I do remember that feeling of desperation when you don't know where that free space is, when the child cries or you're trying to do everything. And for so many women in the world who run their own businesses with, I only had 2 children, when they might have 3, 4, 5, 6. The way forward is to really understand those balances. And as you said, Isabella, you can go into burnout really quickly, especially as a mom. And women tend to be so brave and courageous, they do believe they can do everything. But asking for help is a really important part of it. Because when you're a mom, you don't get much sleep. And when you don't get much sleep and a child is crying or a child is ill, then the stress on your body is just huge. And I know that there's a lot of disrepair in the world, mental health issues and children who actually end up in bad situations because parents are overstressed. And it's not unlike the CEO of a company that is also overstressed and not looking after his children, his board of directors or his team. And it's a similar relationship. It is human factor. It's understanding that as human beings, we work best when we're looking after ourselves and everybody else understands and looks after themselves. It's a ripple process of value. But sadly, there are a lot of parents and teachers and politicians and corporate leaders, male and female, who don't deal with this situation very easily. And if I dare say they don't sleep at night, that adds to the pressure. But I think the whole thing is that identifying yourself within any situation, whether it's a war zone, a corporate battlefield, or a familial situation, you have to identify yourself. So that's what we agree on.
That is excellent perspective from both of you, and I'm glad you shared that because we're seeing shifts, and that's why we're really talking about here, right? And that's why we're cracking leadership code. We used to have a badge of honor, not sleeping and working 60, 70, 80 hours. There was a badge of honor being late in office. There was a badge of honor going beyond and above to push and exhaust yourself. and at the same time constantly being chasing bigger goals, bigger deliverables, and higher expectations, to the point that we truly do have a breaking point. And that is reflected and heavily documented with high percentage of depression, PTSD, mental health issues, but also in nature, how quickly we get into conflict, how little we actually dialogue, how little we truly do communicate, and how more we just talk and converse, right? And have very little connection and interaction. And speaking of that, I'm just super thrilled again to see these amazing comments and interaction from our great colleagues and friends that we're super eager to share here. And obviously, Andres is sharing here how spot on was Dr. Pauline. In previous comment, we also had Aberdeen sharing how team was spot on with what he shared, which is so great to see that resonates with people in different parts of the world, because our audience today is coming from Middle East, Europe, Asia, as well, Americas, and which is really fantastic because how so many things are universal, right? So speaking of that, what are you guys thinking? Why this shift? Why needed to get to this boiling point? And what would you suggest and recommend? Because right now we're obviously seeing new paradigm, new badge of honor. And that looks like quite differently than what you've been introduced in your professional careers early on. So please, if you can reflect on that and point out some really useful tips, because obviously our audience is hungry to discover more.
One of the things I'd like to suggest is that if we were having this conversation 10 years ago or 20 years ago, and you said cracking the leadership code, there would be a lot of people saying, yeah, give me the whip. And that's why we need to qualify this. And I did that on a live I did the other day. It's like we're cracking the leadership code, ... with compassion, with respect, with trust, with kindness, with love, with all the positive aspects of being human as we launch into a post-pandemic economic crisis, I think I can say, and the advance of AI. Everything is changing. So understanding people and understanding the mix of what I call the gender dynamics intelligence, because the whole issue for women is that they have a very different life journey to men. Not every woman has family, but the nature of how we act and are in the world, there's a whole study to that. But I think it's really qualifying. If you say to somebody, we're cracking the leadership code, the first thing is to stop and listen to what they believe that means. Because I believe it means with love, but let's say somebody else might say, oh, yeah, I want to crack the whip, just give me it, So it's about introducing love and all those very positive emotional words into the workplace and the leadership genre that we have left behind when we went into lockdown. I mean, that's what I believe has been the big divide. What do you think?
Yeah, I look at it from a perspective of it's about your people. It's and when you see life that way, you do so because so many people in years past were focused on the job, what they had to do. One of the pitfalls of the military is you get paid the same every month, whether you work 4 hours a day or 18, 19 hours a day. And it became a thing of some people thought, well, this is, you should work this many hours. Commanders would hold meetings at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and expect all the changes they wanted the next morning at 8 o'clock. Well, guess who gets to work late? The staff gets to stay up late and do this job. Okay, well, why do they think that way? Well, because I did it that way. And that's not the way to look at life, because just because you did it that way didn't mean that it was a good idea back then. It isn't now either. And when you come to this perspective of, no, these people are not machines, but even machines use their rest. And I go back to, I would tell people, they say, look at your generator trailer. It has 2 generators on it. Why? You need to switch this one off and let it cool down and turn this one on in its place. Your people are the same way. You cannot just work them to the point of burnout because at which point they become ineffective. And when you think about the fact of, they have lives and this work, this job is not their life. In most cases, that's the way life is. Yes, at sometimes something is very important and I need everybody in the job. I need your game face on. I need your head in the game and you got to do this. But their life is not like that 24 hours a day. And you look at life and don't make it that way. Especially do not take situations that don't merit that kind of an attitude and try to project that on it, because you're only going to make it worse. And your people are not only going to be burned out, they're going to be dissatisfied to the point of they're going to say, maybe this isn't the place I want to be. Maybe I need to be somewhere else.
Well, I love it. And I think I'd like to nominate you, Tim, to be running the world because you have such a wonderful approach. I just want to share, back in 2003-4, I did some research in London on how people in companies, and they were public and private selections, how did they see everybody else? So the question was, in your experience of this organization, does this happen? And one of the top questions was, do most people keep on working even when they're fatigued? And the answer was very, very high yes. And that is one of the, and I think that's still happening, exactly what you said. When people aren't honored, they're worked until the point where there's a harassment case or there's an occ health situation or they've gone off sick. And people saying, oh my God, what happened? Well, what happened was that they weren't adored and loved and valued in the workplace so that they performed at the best that they can possibly give. And that's the nub of what I believe is the heart of business. Would you agree, Isabella?
It's so interesting that you mentioned in this because teens are completely shifting right now, right? And we have, as you said, a very huge, big disconnect. And peak of that is happening based on how people are behaving, right? Specifically, as many are forcing or reinforcing coming back to office versus giving people flexibility where they can also maybe have hybrid model or still continue to work from home, where they truly then can efficiently and effectively work, because some of them not only already assimilated, but found it tremendously beneficial. And if we're not listening, if we're not seen as people, as our biggest assets, right? Either in our own organizations or with our customers or everywhere we go, I feel like we shifted priorities as a leaders, what's the most important. And as a result, we're seeing unprecedented type of behaviors. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts are when we are really black or white thinking or obsolete about something, and where do you see, based on your experience, things headed with not only pressures, demands, and things speeding up? As someone in Vice said years ago, he said, Isabella, today is your slowest day that you're going to live on this planet, because everything around you going to exponentially just keep speeding up. Question is how you're going to respond around everything that is speeding exponentially, and how you're going to assimilate into that, yet also preserve your well-being and everything. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Because obviously something has to give.
Maybe we could challenge that. Maybe the thing that mustn't go is your own human nature. I think a lot of people are totally unaware of when things go wrong and why they go wrong. People are not behaviorally savvy. People generally are not emotionally intelligent. Even though this study has been around for a long time in the world, it hasn't embraced our, dare I say, our traditional education systems. It hasn't been something that some people have embraced. So we're working still in a very cerebral world, and then we have the emotional behavioral world and the understanding of it. And my experience was that I came to understand behavior almost by default. I didn't go off and study. I'm not a trained coach, even though I coach people. I did experience through understanding, going on training programs, starting to understand, going on a whole series of eclectic programs from NLP to self-development, whatever, but then placing it into my own life and saying, okay, what's going on here, especially for women. As I've been around a long time, the program for women in the 80s I was running programs about helping women go back to work. You don't have programs for men helping them to go back to work, and I mean that in a behavioral sense. So although we all can do with help, I think some people are resistant to help. And that's where we have to put a broader framework in that says human beings are valuable. That's the start point. And if human beings are valuable, and we discovered that in COVID, didn't we? When COVID turned up, everything stopped. We didn't say, oh, excuse me, humans don't matter. Suddenly, everything mattered, and we had to put masks on, and we had to do what we were told because people were dying. So there is, when people say to me the world can never change, I go, sorry, hasn't that just happened? And it's changing rapidly. So I think the constant is who we are as human beings, having a philosophy of kindness, love, respect, trust, compassion, all those things, and then understanding how those play out in the work situation and the home situation. But understanding we're all different, we're beautifully unique, equal and unique and different, all of us. And listening and having conversations, which is what you're saying as well, is having the conversations is very much about listening, not always talking, but understanding that conversation is a flow. And it also includes you and me and the world. So it's you and me, us and the world. And we're there to influence the world as opposed to the world controlling us, which I think some people default to. And that's when they don't sleep at night and panic.
Yeah, I would go with that. Is one of the things that's important for leaders is to set realistic goals for themselves and their people. Is you hear a lot of these people moonshots and things like this. Well, it'd be great if we could cure cancer or solve cold fusion or something like that. But you know what? You probably can't. But what can you do towards a goal that's something you can control, that you can realistically achieve? And yes, you want to make it a challenge to yourself and your people, but at the same time, you don't want to overstress or overstrain yourself. You don't want to get yourself to that point where you have to work all this extra time, where you have to do these extra things. Life is going to be such that these are going to pop up unexpected and you deal with them. But when you do this and you control it and you say, I'm controlling what I can control as a leader, and you give this same mindset to your people that they do their diligence. If you have done the thing that you can do, what's important every day, you have done what you can. After September 11th, we found ourselves in a situation where we were having to set up a 24-hour operation. We had people working in shifts, and there was a bit of anxiety. Okay, yes, we've identified these people. Are there more of them out there? Who are they? Yes, there are. We were providing information to law enforcement agencies, to our own people, to go out, track people down, because we immediately start going to say, okay, these people here are involved. Who do they know? Who do they know? Who do they know? And we start looking at a very broad spectrum of people. Well, are we getting them all? Well, you have to tell yourself, you're not going to be able to cast this net and just haul them in like a bunch of fish. You have to do it from a perspective of, there is this much that I can do to control this, and there is this much that I have done, and knowing that I have done this, I'm not worried about it. Someone else is going to pick up the ball and keep running with it as we go along here. I've done my diligence, so I'm in control. I don't have to worry about losing sleep over that.
There's that thing about sleep again.
Yes. And it's also such a great point, Tim, both of you raised. And then also we have one of our listener asking really good question. Is it resonant to help or feeling truly heard rather than their real needs being glossed over? And a lot of times, unfortunately, people are being glossed over. But anyway, what is your take on that?
Well, I think being heard is so important, but also it's about being clear about what you're saying. I mean, it's a two-way process. So, if you've got narcissistic behavior at one end, which is overtly controlling, and you've got victim behavior at the other end that doesn't get heard, you could ask, why is there still domestic violence in the world? Why do women not speak up and stop that? Why is there, why we can ask so many questions, why do more people have more money than I have? You can ask so many questions. It's when we feel we are heard, we're never actually ever going to know somebody totally. I think that was one of the things I was looking at today. It's like really truly understanding ourselves is the major journey. And then being clear about how you express that to somebody and make sure it's the right kind of person and people. So they're not people who say, oh, don't worry, I'll fix you, or oh, no, you're wrong, or who are critical. If that starts coming in and you feel it, you feel the energy blocking, you say, well, thank you. Okay, I'll go somewhere else. Find somewhere else where there's a right space where people will hear you. That's the thing about listening and hearing is two different things. And I think in my study of different archetypes that I use, we have very different perspectives. Different generations have different perspectives. Different cultures have different perspectives. The conversation needs to be, for me, non-judgmental. So we may hear things that actually we don't like, but we don't go, oh, you're wrong. We just say, oh, that's an interesting perspective. And we may move on. Or we may say, but we don't need to get into anything that drains us and damages us. That's your first responsibility, is yourself.
Yes.
It's a classic, isn't it? On the aircraft, you need to put the mask on.
Oh, yes. Yeah, I look at this as from a perspective of the leaders. What you have to do is, I say, the three most important things in leadership are communication, communication, and communication. When you are speaking to your people, when you are listening to them and getting the feedback and working with each other, you're going to be effective. When you come across these situations that require a bit of extra effort, so the leaders have to communicate the why of this and make sure that the people understand, yes, we have to do this. And this is a natural part of work in any situation. Is there is going to be those times, the unexpected. You have to drop what you're doing, take care of this right away. And yes, it may run beyond 5 p.m. At the same time, you're listening. Okay, I have a child I have to pick up from daycare at this time. Okay, let's be a little flexible on this. If I'm going to allow you to go pick up your child and stuff like this, we can do this. We can still make this happen another way. Especially now in the days of remote work, you've got your computer at home. That will help in that kind of case and make it much better. And when people understand this, because we have here, I see one of the comments says, need to change the culture of trust. That's how you build that trust. Because as time goes on, the people are going to trust you. And when you tell them something, that trust becomes automatic. They're reassured by what you're saying. They're not dreading it. And yes, you are going to get the occasional person who is sniveling, as I say, come in and whining. And leaders have to recognize this and diffuse it in a way that's effective without necessarily being demeaning to the person, is get them to understand the importance of what they're doing. And basically, you can handle this. I need you to go out there and do it because the rest of the team is counting on you too.
Well, that's right. And I was going to ask you, Isabella, about this, the difference between the individual wisdom and the collective wisdom. That's what I think is a conversation that I like to have, because we are concerned about our individual self-care and who we are. But we sit inside a world where very often we're with people, even if it's on Zoom or it's at the supermarket or wherever it is. And how we gather the collective wisdom is something I'm fascinated by, because that's more, to me, it's more than communication. It's where the conversation sits.
It's a very profound, but also what based on our users. I don't want to neglect that either. And you're spot on. It's a different types of communications, and obviously they're talking about how it's important to have conversation as we're having right now, and how huge that is, and how important it is to explore. Thank you so much for everyone giving thumbs up. By the way, we're getting here in opportunities where Tim was also being seen as a future global president, which is fantastic. And so as I mentioned earlier of Dr. Pauline and her wisdom circles, and how all of this actually ties together beautifully, because it is the words of wisdom. It's the words not only just from experience, but what did we learn? How do we apply all of this, and how we bring this collectively together? So thank you for Gita, thank you for Andreas, thank you for so many amazing participants here. Sofane, the ones again, that I cannot see the names yet, Matt and Amberdine and many others, for sharing also your perspective. If you have any questions, this is opportunity to ask now, because where we're going, resistance is happening all around us. We always resist when we don't feel comfortable, when we don't know enough, or when we are feeling threatened, or when we're fearful. And we also know that fear is very high more than ever right now, fear factor, right? Worried about so many things, and some things are truly legit, true worry. And some of them are also more made up in our head, being much more challenging and difficult, depending how we feel internally, how we feel about ourselves, how we feel about people around us. And it's such a difficult way to really understand unless we take ownership, right? And from leadership perspective, I really feel like right now we have a tremendous opportunity to really take sense of ownership and accountability, not only for our actions, but also for non-actions, and also the way we demand or command or interact. And with that in mind, for all the plethora of experiences and observations, what do you find the most transformative through your work to help people to deal with level of complexities and issues similar to what we're seeing today?
Well, the interesting thing that came to mind when you were speaking is that the world is speeding up. Life seems to be speeding up, but actually we need to slow it down in the moment. So when I developed the idea of magical conversations, the idea was that it was a space in which you could step into and not be judged, and no one would be angry or over controlling in the time of the conversation. So that's where it started. And what I found over the years, and I've run this with clients as well as personal groups, people say, I love being in that space because I'm not judged. So it starts there. I can actually share, and nobody, and the conversations can get very deep. It is not about fluffy stuff at all. But there's nobody judging me, nobody asking who I am. I don't have to bring my ego in. In fact, I always say to people, you leave your ego outside the door, and if you want to pick it up on the way out, that's your choice. But when we step into our ego too much, we control the conversation in a way that we don't get results. Because what we're looking at, and I use the word magical because magic is making the unbelievable believable. And therefore, if we're going to create something in a world that we don't know yet, then
Yes.
these are the kind of conversations. And the space is important because even if it's on Zoom, the conversation is between us. It's not my conversation, it's in between us. Ideally in a circle. So when I work face to face with clients, it's in a circle. And it's not every conversation. So I don't want people to think, oh, that's all fluffy, we can't have work like that. But it's almost like a plug-in. It's a plug-in that says, right, when we get into this space, and it could be an hour a week, this is a space where you're going to sit, you're going to feel okay, and you can share, and you can put the topic in the middle of the room. So look at some difficult topics like harassment or abuse, or business topics like customer service. All of those things can be in the center, but you're facing into the topic, and you're sharing in a listening, sharing. And there's no assumptions made, no opinions. You're expressing your experience of whatever the topic is. And although you slow things down, you speed up the results. Because if you take notice as the leader of what comes out of that, you would tune into the hearts of the people in that space in a way that they've never felt before. And they feel, oh my God, I actually got listened to. My idea actually got on the table. This is why I say I'd like to change all the square tables in the world to round tables. Might be some manufacturers who could help me out there, but King Arthur did it, and the whole idea with a round table is that you're looking into that center space. So if we take the rigor of business, which says it's X, Y, Z, it's action, it's tasks, it's results, and you say actually we can massage that with these safe spaces of creative conversation, it's fabulous. And my experience is it turns departments, teams round, and they say to me, wow, this has lasted forever. I say, yeah, because it's life-changing. It's not training.
Yes. Yeah, I would say for the leaders, one of the most important things you have to do is you have to build that level of trust. And you do that by, first of all, knowing what you're doing, knowing your job well, knowing the big picture well, understanding that, communicating to your people, and then make sure that they have the training and the tools to do the job. And this does take time. It doesn't come overnight. But as you build them up, one of the things is about, okay, this has to go faster. Okay, when you get them proficient, they are going to perform faster because they are proficient in their job. One of the things in my last job, they were big on how many. I was always big on how well did you do it. Well, we had to strike a balance there, but I focused them on that. They got more done in an efficient manner, and it was done well because they knew what they're doing, and they felt good about themselves in the process. I set a very high standard for them. As they met that standard and sometimes exceeded it, and I would let them know when they did, that became a source of pride. It was actually something that they desired. In one case, I was very demanding on the way they were doing their reports. Somebody got a report through on the first pass the first time. Well, I came into their work area the next day, and she had this posted on the wall there so everybody could see it. And I mentioned that she was the first one to do that, and they said, "Yeah, we know. She told us." And when you build that level of people knowing and taking pride in their work, they're going to work better, and things will move faster on their own. It doesn't take a whip. It takes a come on, follow me type attitude in there, and they're with you all the way. Now, one of the challenges is the bosses that are above you. You have to convince them that this is working in their way because they usually just see the numbers. And surprisingly, many of them do not see the big picture in the way that you do if you're not, because they're looking at this. I have these numbers here. I have to do this. My boss is asking about these numbers here. Okay, you have to explain to them what's going on and get their buy-in too. And sometimes this is more of a challenge than the people who are working for you, is convincing them that you're on the right track here and that this is the way to do it. And sometimes you got to invite them down. Well, come down and see it for yourself. And get them, if you can get them in that attitude, then you can start to turn that around and get that moving in the direction you need. And they're less in your business, which makes your life easier.
Absolutely. It's a win-win for everybody. That's why over the years that I've been working with the idea of corporate heart with my company, it's I hate the expression, but it's a no-brainer, but we don't do it often. And when people feel valued, they do so much more. And that's such the simple answer to this very complex issue. So I think leaders who understand the world is changing very fast, they are still the leader of their business. And we can prove to them that these things make additional bottom line benefits. Then they need to take honor and ownership and say, okay, I'm going to trust that this is going to happen. And there are stories, so many that I've had where, people have said, I didn't think this was going to happen. I was actually going to leave because I didn't like my boss. She was so horrible. But now I realize her character is this and that. And that's what I do, is help people understand we're all different characters around that round table. And the magic is knowing the synergy and the harmony that we can create. And it adds value to our lives. So for me, it goes right back to the beginning of where we said self-value is also collective self-value and collective wisdom. We just have to step into that space and find enough companies that will show their face, their heart and mind, and shout about it. Tell the world that this is the way to go. That's my dream.
That's great, and we're having a couple of really great questions here. Here previously, where we were asked when is good to take a non-action, and where is needed support, and how to know it. I mean, And if you don't mind, I'm going to quickly answer that. And as you guys read this question from Gita, which I really want you to answer to her. So knowing when to take action and non-action, it's dance, right? It's a really knowing um, who are your members, what level of support they need or not, and then how do you need to support and show up individually for each one of them, because everybody have a different level of expertise or passions or desires or motivations. More we know about each other and pivot on that, then we'll know. It's just, think about it like a great dance where you would either switch the partners, or where you also let someone to dance solo, or where you all come, as Pauline put it, together in the circle together and dance harmoniously with each other. So who would like to tackle first Gita's question?
Well, one of the things that I'll just start is that some of the words we use need to change. So the idea that staff can walk away without having formed opinions. Let's not form opinions. Let's actually stop judging everybody and listen and form evaluations. Use different words. I wrote a post this morning about, expressing opinions versus sharing experiences. It's a very different energy. A lot of leaders who are in that high level of authority may have a large ego and they are looking at the bottom line, but I think also they have fear. They have fear of not achieving that. So if we increase the ability for them to have small bite-sized wins where they will get into these conversations, and maybe we don't call them conversations with the ruler who is ruling with the law, it's using the words that's going to tune into different people. So once you tune into somebody, you can then invite your own dialogue into it. It's some basic behavioral tricks and techniques, but there are ways of understanding why what you say doesn't land. So if you change the way you say and it does land, you get a win, you start having a bridge with somebody else. You start making those changes. And I've seen that with clients where somebody was literally going to leave the business because they couldn't stand the boss. And by doing some work with them, they changed their perspective. Nothing else changed. They changed their perspective and the conversation and the words they used, and they stayed working together, and it was a plus, plus, plus. So don't make assumptions. That's one thing I put in my book, The Power of Authentic Harmony, is don't make assumptions and don't judge overtly quickly. Obviously, you have to make decisions, which may be judgments, but in that place where you're tuning into other people, remember, they're all seeing the world differently to the way you see it. And it's understanding that lens. Have you ever used a kaleidoscope? When I was a kid, you had a kaleidoscope and you could move it. It's a bit like that. Those are all the people in your business. And if you turn it one way, it'll fall that way, another way, it'll fall that way. And really, as Tim said as well, get to know who your assets are. They're your people. They're not there to kick you out of the boardroom. They want to work with you. Make that assumption. That's the only assumption. And then work to understand what they need and not use the wrong words. Opinions are always difficult.
Yeah. I look at this from the perspective of you're in control, because now my experience is more public service, military service oriented. There wasn't a profit motive involved here, but it's a case of that people still expect results. Now,
yes.
you can have some control over what is a result. And one of the things you want to do is do not wait for bosses from on high to come down and ask you about your business. Before that happens, you get in and you get to know them. You talk to them, you get to know them, find out what matters to them, find out what's important to them. At the same time, get it on there, let them know what's important to you. And they see each other's perspective. We call this in the military, the view from my foxhole. Is I see it this way. Now the person 3-4 levels up has an expectation, but they have to understand what I see. And that will help. Now, it doesn't always work that easy. It's something that develops over time. But at the same time, if you know what they want, you can do it. Take what you're doing and frame it to where it's giving them what they need in a matter they're getting. First of all, you want them to have what they're doing. You don't want to give them any false notions. But at the same time, you do want to make sure that they understand that it's coming from your perspective and this is the result is there. And you present it as results, because one of the biggest problems people have in business or in anything else, or especially in public service, is they confuse process with result. And that's what you want to do, show results. And when you show results, hopefully if it's in the business world, that it's generating profit and it's going to make them happy. And rather than them asking, they're already knowing, they're hearing what they want to hear. And that's making them happy. And in the process, you and your people are going to look good.
So deep and profound, and then really a lot to really focus on during the time that we're experiencing, obviously, many troublesome reasons that keep us awake at night as we're cracking leadership code, and sharing so much great wisdom from Dr. Pauline Crawford and Tim Bowen, and fantastic participation from our audience, just alone from LinkedIn, with great questions and comments, which we're deeply, deeply grateful. So guys, we have a last round of questions that you can ask. So if you have any dying desire to ask them before we wrap up, will be time to do now. And I wanted to also focus on something that Dr. Pauline specifically is focusing on and doing. So do you mind sharing, audience, what are you up to? What are you going to be doing next week? And why are you finding, obviously, the conversation, the topic so important? And what are you addressing so that everybody who is watching and listening can come over, join you, and be able to really deep dive? These are just the quick snippets of what you're going to be able to address and deep dive with the audience.
Absolutely. So on Wednesday, I've set up a workshop online on Zoom. So you can come in from anywhere in the world, and it's called Cracking the Leadership Code. It's 3.5 hours, so I will give you a pee break. But essentially, it's an exploration into some of the things we've been talking about, many of the things, but also adding in a layer of knowledge around your own gender dynamic archetype. How do you see the world? We can assess that through our physicality, through our behavioral patterns, our natural reactive patterns. So the workshop will cover that. It will give you a whole tranche of knowledge, which I usually share with my corporate clients like Barclays and BT and law firms. I've worked with some major organizations. People are people. So I'm sharing this with you in this workshop. It's a very low ticket price for a very high return, because I want to share my knowledge with you. I have a book which you will get a free e-copy, The Power of Authentic Harmony, which has very profound principles. So we'll work through the principles and the archetypes, but the other key thing is we're going to work through your own situations. And I'm not diving into your personal life, but sharing what issues do you have without naming names. And what you'll find is that everybody shares very similar issues. I don't get on with this person. My boss seems to not listen to me. When I'm leading my team, they don't really do what I want them to do. You know, whatever it is, it will be, to be honest, it will be very commonly felt amongst everybody, because essentially we're going to look at the value cycle, the principles, the philosophy, and the gender dynamics archetype. So it's a deep dive. I need to be willing and active and sharing, and you'll get lots of content and lots of knowledge. But my goal is that I spread this to the world, so outside of the corporate environment as well as in the corporate environment. And that's really my passion, is my legacy, is to help the world be better tuned in to each other. So I always say getting to know yourself is one hell of a journey, and it's a life journey. But getting to know other people who are not the same as you is the second greatest superpower that you can have. And to be honest, this is only one step in the journey, but join me on Wednesday. The link will be put below this live when it goes out. Just join up and get involved, and let's have some serious fun.
That sounds great. And for everybody, again, watching and listening and participating, I wanted to just to stress out how important it is to really learn as Yetta was asking how different organizations have a different leadership, and as a result, they have a different result because they're not having right dialogues. They're avoiding elephants in the room. They're doing things quote unquote politically correct. We all know, we can all see through all of them. And we know when people are truly genuinely interested to help you to advance not only in your career or professionally or personally, and when they don't, right? So it's a huge opportunity to have more tools in your toolkit and be able to address these challenges that Tim Bowen acquired, as well as Dr. Pauline, for over the last 40 plus years. And as a result, they have tremendous success and trajectory. But what is really beautiful about all of that is, as she pointed out, how can you learn something very quickly and be able to apply and be the game changer, even though your organization maybe not be ready for those conversations and they're still doing politically correct? You can lead a way, show them what's possible. Or if you're already leading large teams, what's possible to make a change there, and how can you contribute and be that, again, game changer, so you can start experimenting and collaborating in a different way with your teams, with different departments, taking down the silos. One of the biggest gifts I wanted to give everybody today is the opportunity to look at yourself and recognize how amazing you are, and how, again, you navigate complexity, not always maybe with the ease, but you're always coming on that other side. And if you could have more tools that can get you going and get you there quicker, faster, with better ease, with better sleep at night, and also opportunity to exchange and connect, I would highly encourage everyone to connect to both Dr. Pauline Crawford and also Tim Bowen, my great advisors, great colleagues, great friends, someone that I, again, respect dearly. And reason why I'm highlighting this is not a sales pitch, guys. Value doesn't need to be sold. It's truly an opportunity for you to stay tuned in their posts. Tim Bowen, for example, has a fantastic newsletter that he's constantly focusing on really leadership aspects of it. Dr. Pauline Crawford has the same thing. They're daily posting amazing content on LinkedIn. And that is something you can also have a planted seeds on daily basis for your personal growth. And now for something, again, being exclusively offered, we'll have a link shortly. You guys take action. And now to focus on you, phenomenal audience, I wanted to see here, Chris is saying some great stuff. Thank you, Chris. Faraz joined. Thank you so much for Faraz joining. It means a lot. I'm so glad you're able to be with us today and participate. Love to hear your comments later. Matt from UK, great to have you with us as well. We had a chance to hear from Vijay. It's really great to have you. Rita. We also had a chance to have others to be part of it, including Andrea's and many more, Yasmin. So anyway, for everybody that is being part of it, I would just want to say deep, profound thank you. And now back to my guests here in the studio. In the closing, what keeps you awake at night? One last remark and piece of advice you want to give for our audience that is being so amazing, just to give them a little bit more value. One thing if they could do to further drive themselves along personally, professionally, what would that be?
Well, I would like to say the best thing they could do is to come on my workshop on Wednesday, of course. But apart from that, keep on smiling at yourself. It's something that I've always done, even in challenging times, is to remember that life is precious and you're precious, and to honor yourself and make sure that you look in the mirror and say, it's okay, I can get through this, I can grow, I am enough. Whatever it is you need to say, you are the most important person in your life, and not without the ego.
Yeah, very much so. And I just want to add to people is that change comes over time. These things don't happen overnight. These are things that you have to put in place. Again, you're working with your own people. You're working with your higher bosses. It's going to take time to do. It's like turning an aircraft carrier. You can't just spin the wheel and turn it. It takes a lot of ocean to move this thing around. You can get it done. You just have to be patient with it and keep at it. Don't make things like this what they call a management fad, where you start doing something and then 2 weeks later it's out the window and you're doing something else. No, you keep at it, you preach it, you live it to the point of this. As Jack Welch at GE said, I gave the company line so much I got tired of hearing it myself. It's you get out there, and when you live it and when they see that you truly are a believer, they will come along. And as they do, that's when your real change starts to happen.
That is amazing. I love that. And I wanted to say in closing how important it is to truly be that true amazing leader that you always wanted to work for, or wanted to be part of organization, or wanted to deal with, and opportunities where you can really assert yourself with support instead of dominance, and assert yourself as an individual who truly genuinely care, because we are all about here to create an impact. You have amazing skill set and opportunity to do that. And we really want you to be as impactful in everything you do. So go champions, go get them, whatever you're trying to achieve and accomplish. And looking forward to more conversations in their future. And right now we're also having the link if you guys are curious and wanted to investigate further what Dr. Pauline is sharing earlier about her workshop. And everybody else, have a fantastic weekend. Looking forward to chatting with you guys soon. Bye.